Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Hello and Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to TIGERS.net podcast number 9. मैं हूँ आपका होस्ट आपका दोस्त मुन्ना and I am creator of TIGERS.net forum. आज हमें ज्वाइन किया है हमारे बहुत ही खास दोस्त, a very dear friend from our Twitter cricket fraternity OAK, जिनको हम प्यार से खैरी बुलाते हैं, and of course उनके साथ मौजूद हैं हमारे हर दिल अजीज TIGERS.net forum की moderator Kenny. So welcome to our podcast. सो गाइस, आज हमारा एजेंडा कुछ पाकिस्तान क्रिकेट रिलेटेड ऑपरेशन से है, जो प्रोसेसेस हैं रमीज राजा उसमें डिस्कस होंगे, पाकिस्तान क्रिकेट बोर्ड के एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन में डिस्कस होगी, कुछ पुरानी रिजीम्स उसमें डिस्कस होंगी। तो इंशाल्लाह बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग डिस्कशन मैं एक्सपेक्ट कर रहा हूँ आप दोनों से। तो शुरू से शुरू करते हैं। खैरी, आपसे सबसे पहले पूछ रहे थे एक जनरल सा सवाल, और कैनी आपके भी व्यूज इसके ऊपर लेंगे। रमीज राजा ये जब से आए हैं एज चेयरमैन ऑफ पाकिस्तान क्रिकेट बोर्ड, हमने देखे कि काफ़ी इवेंटफुल टेन्योर चल रहा है अभी तक। उन्होंने फैसल हसनैन को भी हायर किया है एज सीईओ। तो अभी तक आप क्या देख रहे हैं, क्योंकि पिछली हमने जो रिजीम की पीसीबी को उसमें हमने देखा था कि एहसान मानी वाज देयर एंड देन वसीम खान वाज बीइंग एट द फोरफ्रंट of all the action, but Ehsan Mani was more at the administrative side of things. But इस वाली regime में हम देख रहे हैं कि रमीज राजा काफ़ी ज़्यादा मीडिया में रहते हैं, बेसिकली बहुत ज़्यादा अपने आप को कैमरे के सामने वो रहना अभी भी पसंद करते हैं। उनकी जो एक बड़ी वाइब्रेंट सी पर्सनैलिटी है, एंड इट्स अंडरस्टैंडेबल, हिज बैकग्राउंड इज फ्रॉम द मीडिया। सो वो सारी चीज़ें देख के आपको अभी तक क्या लग रहा है कि उन्होंने जितने अभी तक एक्शंस किए हैं या जितनी बातें की हैं, उसमें एक लैक ऑफ इम्प्लीमेंटेशन आप देख रहे हैं? तो उसका एक रिव्यू आपसे जानना चाहेंगे।
Thank you, Munna. So, yeah, sabse pehle to let me just say right at the outset that I'm a big fan of the work that you guys do. I mean, compared to mainstream journalists, the amount of coverage that you guys provide and the depth that you guys go into, I think it's a testament to your understanding of the game, and it's always a pleasure engaging with you guys, be it on Twitter Spaces or on this very platform. So it's a pleasure to be here with you guys. So now coming to your question, I think, look, Mira stance bada clear hai. Whoever is in power, especially when you're the chairman of a board like the PCB, where there are more often than not polarizing views, you need to give someone enough time to then judge their performance or to evaluate their performance. I think Ramiz has just come into the equation. As we saw, Wasim Khan did some, he implemented some fantastic initiatives, and I think he was more or less sort of executing Imran's vision. And I think you will see a bit of continuity in that perspective, because Ramiz is also someone who's a fan of what Imran Khan, wants in terms of how cricket should evolve in Pakistan. And I think Ramiz will, in all likelihood, help Imran implement his vision of the game. So you will see a bit of a consistency in that regard. But yes, you're absolutely right. Ramiz is a different personality. He's someone who's a lot more media savvy. I mean, obviously, having been a commentator for over almost 2 decades now, he has no issues or no qualms with regards to expressing his point of view and engaging with the fans, which I think is a good thing, because fans need to be aware of what the chairman is thinking. So on a lot of fronts, I think he has a lot of great potential. I feel Ramiz, for more often than not, comes under a lot of scrutiny, in terms of the statements that he gives, and more often than not, he's criticized, which I don't think is fair, because he's only been on the scene for a few months now. So we should give him at least a couple of years before we pass any sweeping statement with regards to his tenure. So on the whole, I think there are a few things that he's done well. As someone who's interacted with him, even in a professional capacity, I can tell you that he has, he's very ambitious. He has some interesting plans up his sleeves. Just recently, we saw this initiative called Pepsi's Voice of Pakistan, where he encouraged the new crop of commentators to sort of come up, and he was someone who espoused that idea, who advocated that idea, and he was very supportive of Pepsi's initiative to give these guys that platform. So I think he has some interesting ideas up his sleeves, and I think we need to give him some time to demonstrate what he has to offer.
यानी खैरी ने एक इंटरेस्टिंग जो बीच में बात बोली थी कि जो स्वीपिंग स्टेटमेंट्स अभी हम लोग ना दें तो ज़्यादा बेहतर है, बट स्वीपिंग स्टेटमेंट्स तो चेयरमैन की तरफ से खुद आ रही है ज़्यादा, और हम देख रहे हैं कि जो है अभी तक इतने ज़्यादा एक्शंस नहीं लिए जा रहे हैं। लेकिन यस, ही इज राइट इन अ वे कि लेट्स गिव हिम सम मोर लीवे ओवर हियर until he
Munna,
starts
look at it this way. Before Kanye actually even answers this, I remember, and I'm sure you do as well, when Wasim Khan was appointed, there were a lot of people who were criticizing his selection as well. So there will always be some sections that will criticize, regardless of whoever's becoming the chairman, right? But as we all saw with the passage of time, Wasim Khan was able to deliver. Of course, he had ample experience of administration, and he was able to bring that and demonstrate that over a period of time. And I think some of his actions were, I mean, they have benefited Pakistan cricket in both the short and long term. So, but I mean, if people's criticism is, I mean, that shouldn't be the yardstick to measure anyone, because there will always be people that will that will moan and grumble for no reason at all. I mean, let the guy first showcase what he has to offer, give him enough time, and then sure, and then you can always judge him accordingly. But I think it's just a tad premature to label any kind of things on Ramiz.
No, fair enough. I think if specific to Wasim Khan, he was maybe at a little bit of a disadvantage because jab wo aaye, being a British Pakistani, I think there are certain sections of the mainstream media in Pakistan, I guess to a larger extent within the PCB as well, who were resistant to having somebody from not within the system come in and try to operate और वो अपना mandate लेके आए. Obviously थोड़े से जो changes उनने किए that you can understand certain people in the media were used to certain privileges for an extended period of time और जब वो उनसे लिए गए तो उसके ऊपर भी थोड़ा resentment था. But Ramiz का just because he's been a commentator and part of media in a sense broadcasting for I guess over 20 years at this point. So he is a specialist in that. And I think uska jo narrative जो बिल्ड करना होता है ना टू यूज ब्रॉडकास्टिंग टू योर एडवांटेज राइट वो चीजें हम कुछ सेंस में देख रहे हैं कि रमीज इज ट्राइंग टू बी इन फ्रंट ऑफ द कैमरा एंड ट्राइंग टू मेक अ केस फॉर हिमसेल्फ बट आई थिंक कुछ हद तक देयर इज अ सर्टेन सेगमेंट ऑफ फैंस एंड दिस इज समथिंग दैट खैरी भाई स्पोक टू maybe he's overdoing that right जिस तरह आप 3 टेस्ट मैच सीरीज थी अगेंस्ट ऑस्ट्रेलिया and ठीक है पिचेस के ऊपर एक overwhelming discussion था but even after the very first test match जो draw out हुआ is it necessary for the chairman of the board to come in front of the camera and try to justify कि भाई ये conditions थी ये opponent था ये हमारी situation थी this is why we did it मतलब is he going overboard with that इसके ऊपर थोड़ा question mark उठाया जा सकता है but I think खैरी is right in saying कि किसी भी बंदे को किसी भी role में judge करने के लिए you have to give him a certain amount of time right उसमें वो there are certain things that I guess he might have had plans from before he came into the role और उसकी implementation में एक एहसास होता है बंदे को कि जो चीजें मैं शायद 4 हफ्ते में करना चाहता था उनको करते करते 4 महीने लग जाएं there's little things like that but Ramiz का जो एक focus shift हुआ है towards strategic partnerships I think that is something that to his credit I don't think any other PCB chairman before this has spoken about as frequently आप वर्ल्ड कप के ऊपर चले जाएं T20 पे तो यू विल रिमेंबर विद बैंक अल्फला ही ब्रॉट इन दोस स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप के ऊपर आपको 2 कंसल्टेंट्स ला के दिए that were being entirely funded drop in pitches I believe is an agenda that's been delayed a little bit at this point but from what I understand Arif Habib Group is the company that's backing that तो इस तरह के जो endeavors हैं if Ramiz is able to like put them in bring them into action make them effective in the long run obviously लोग उसको acknowledge करेंगे और उसको support करेंगे
ओके सो कैनी एंड खैरी इससे पहले मैं डिस्कशन को आगे बढ़ाऊं अगर आप लोग मुझे इजाजत दें तो मैं एक बड़ा खास प्लगइन करता हुआ चलूं यहाँ जो कि बहुत जरूरी है हमारे लिसनर्स के लिए बेसिकली जो हमारा सीडी ब्रदरहुड जो है हमारे कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स.नेट पे हमारे जो कुछ खास पुराने मेंबर्स हैं हमने मिलकर ये डिसाइड किया ये प्लान किया कि हम पाकिस्तान के जो वाटर स्कार्स एरियाज हैं जहाँ पानी की किल्लत है जहाँ लोगों को साफ पानी पीने के लिए नहीं मिलता वहाँ हम उनके लिए कुआं लगवाएं हम इसके ऊपर रिसर्च किए एंड देन वी फाउंड आउट दैट अल खिदमत फाउंडेशन ये काम बहुत अच्छे तरीके से पाकिस्तान में कर रहा है दे हैव ऑलरेडी इंस्टॉल्ड मोर देन 2200 वाटर वेल्स अक्रॉस पाकिस्तान सो वी हैव pledged our support to Al Khidmat Foundation and for the same purpose we launched this charity drive this project a few days back and we have received an overwhelming response so far. I am so much grateful to all of you who have been supporting cornertarget.net in this mission. अगर आप लोगों ने अभी तक डोनेट नहीं किया तो मैं 2 तरीके आपको बता देता हूँ जिसके ज़रिए से आप डोनेट कर सकते हैं। there is a financial way which you can go to our GoFundMe link which I would be sharing in the description of this video and you go to that link, you donate whatever amount you want to and then you collect all those donations, all that charity money and then we'll forward that to Al Khidmat Foundation. Second तरीका ये है कि if you cannot contribute financially, then what you need to do is that you basically go to the cornertigers.net forum, become a member of our community, and then start posting. हम उसको कन्वर्ट करेंगे इनटू अ मॉनेटरी फॉर्म फॉर ईच 50 पोस्ट इट वुड बी कन्वर्टेड टू 500 रुपीस एंड सो ऑन। और फिर हम वो सारा आपकी पोस्ट को काउंट करके हम फाउंडेशन को भेजेंगे और इंशाल्लाह उसके जरिए से भी हम ये पानी का कुआं किसी भी पाकिस्तान के इलाके में हम लगवाएंगे और इंशाल्लाह हमारे लोगों को इससे जो है बहुत ज़्यादा फ़ायदा होगा। और ये एक सदका जारिया के तौर पे हमने शुरू किया है। हम कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि यहाँ जो हमारी पाकिस्तान क्रिकेट की जो ऑनलाइन क्रिकेट कम्युनिटी है, हम उससे जो है कुछ फ़ायदा हासिल कर सकें, आपकी पोस्ट को मीनिंगफुल बना सकें, आपके इस जज़्बे को जो है हम किसी बेहतर जगह पे जो है उसको हम इन्वेस्ट कर सकें। और रमज़ान का मुक़द्दस महीना भी है, हम उम्मीद करते हैं कि हमें ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा कॉन्ट्रिब्यूशंस मिलेंगी। Please, if you would like to support cornertype.net forum in this initiative in any other way possible, please get in touch with us today and join hands with us because our Pakistani brothers and sisters, they need us. And we are trying to make a difference in this holy month of Ramadan. Thank you so much. तो डिस्कशन को आगे बढ़ाते हैं गाइस। स्पीकिंग इन टर्म्स ऑफ क्रिकेट आइडियोलॉजी ऑन द फील्ड, आपको क्या फर्क दिखता है वसीम खान के टेन्योर में और रमीज राजा की जो करंट टेन्योर चल रहा है? क्या एक्सपेक्ट कर रहे हैं कि फील्ड पे आपको टीम में क्या फर्क दिखेगा? बिकॉज वी सॉ that when Wasim Khan came over, he brought in team management of Waqar Younis and Misbah Haq. But now जैसे ही रमीज राजा आते हैं तो दोनों रिजाइन कर देते हैं और अभी कुछ अर्सा पहले उनकी दोनों की स्टेटमेंट्स भी आई थी कि उन्होंने आउट ऑफ रिस्पेक्ट रमीज राजा वाज ब्रिंगिंग इन अ न्यू आइडियोलॉजी, तो उसके ऊपर मिसबाह एंड वकार दे एक्नॉलेज के वो उसके ऊपर नहीं उतरते थे तो उन्होंने दोनों ने रिजाइन किया। तो हम ऑन फील्ड इसको किस लिहाज से देख रहे हैं कि कितना ज्यादा जो है हम फर्क देखेंगे टीम कैसे आगे चलती है एंड देन स्ट्रेटेजिक जो पार्टनरशिप चल रही है आजकल, जो ये सारे जो मीडिया के ऊपर इतना हम देख रहे हैं, पाकिस्तान क्रिकेट बोर्ड का अपना यूट्यूब चैनल है एंड देन ट्विटर हैंडल्स एंड देन ऑल दी सोशल मीडिया, तो इसके ऊपर ये क्या जरूरी है, ये नेसेसरी है ये करना?
Maybe Ramiz has overdone it in terms of coming on television and sort of justifying pitches and everything else, because that's not really his job. I mean, his job is to focus on um, ensuring that the infrastructure is in place, that the game continues to develop and grow, and taking those strategic decisions as opposed to getting involved with with the tactical initiatives. But at the same time, that's just who he is as an individual. So I'm not too surprised to see things panning out like that. Now, when you talk about Wasim Khan, I mean, he was a guy that you would typically associate terms like composure and someone who was assured of what he was doing, someone who preferred to let his actions do the talking, right? And that is why I felt, I mean, personally, that is something which appeals to me as a fan. I'd rather the chairman focus on getting things right, prioritizing and sorting out things, as opposed to coming on the screen and justifying what he or she, for that matter, feels. So I mean, that's the reason why I was a fan of Asim Khan and his administration. Even though, I mean, when you spoke about the coaches and all of those things, I mean, you have to remember that when Misbah was appointed the coach, I mean, initially he was the chairman. Sorry, he was the batting coach, the head coach, and the chief selector at the same time, and there was no such precedent of that. At least not in the case of Pakistan. So that was a bold and risky move, which in hindsight didn't quite work out for Pakistan, because with the passage of time, Misbah was stripped of all of those roles, and then at the end he was just the head coach. So I think for any organization to thrive, it requires a fair degree of stability. It requires an environment that is conducive to things being done on a regular basis. And I think Wasim Khan, by appointing Misbah as the chief selector and the coach, and then later on, sort of, taking those powers away from him, I don't think that was the right move. If you take a decision, stand by it, right? Be consistent and stick to it, and then see what the results. And then, as I was saying earlier, give that person enough time to prove himself. So unfortunately, that wasn't done with Misbah. And another thing that was really upsetting for me was that they did not really follow any due process. I mean, Misbah was appointed without any proper process in place. In fact, at that point in time, Dean Jones, the late Dean Jones, he actually voiced his annoyance at the way this, I mean, the way this entire affair was conducted. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, he said something like, "I'll never apply for an official post within Pakistan cricket ever again." So I think that was a damning indictment of how this entire thing was managed. Having said that, there are a lot of great things that Wasim Khan did, and as we all know, we're all a fan of the way he encouraged teams to tour Pakistan, the way he supported even the A teams. I think there was a lot of good work that was done on that front. Like when Ramiz has, when he sort of came into the, assumed this role, I mean, I was a bit disappointed that he changed. That he changed the coach on the eve of the T20 World Cup, because Misbah had been with the team for almost 2 years. You should have let him stick around. You should have allowed him to sort of execute his plan, and then after the T20 World Cup, if any changes had to be made, they could have made it then. So what I'm trying to say is that these erratic changes don't help any organization, and PCB or cricket for that matter isn't an exception to the rule. So far, I mean, again, that's why I just hope that Ramiz doesn't make too many haphazard changes. There needs to be a certain degree of consistency in the way they go about developing the game of cricket. And inshallah, Pakistan has a lot of great talent here. Let's not overlook that. I mean, the fact is, Pakistan cricket has been flourishing despite the issues that we currently face, despite the system failures and all the inefficiencies that we see on a daily basis. So if only Ramiz can hopefully sort out the infrastructure, and you brought the point of the drop in pitches, that's just one aspect. The pitches aspect is something that Pakistan needs to rectify, because what we've seen in the recently concluded series, I mean, clearly that wasn't a great advertisement for the game, and Pakistan can and should do better. So these are things which Ramiz needs to prioritize, as opposed to coming on television and saying all the stuff he does. I'm not in favor of that, not at all. Lastly, the point about strategic collaborations that you mentioned, I think this is Ramiz's forte, or something that he's great at. He's working with various organizations and trying to sort of bring them into the fold, and trying to see how they can exploit this passion point. Because bear in mind that as a marketeer, I can tell you that cricket and music are two very important passion points in Pakistan, and especially for an organization like Pepsi, which has been sponsoring the national team, it's very important for us to make the most of this partnership. Just sponsoring the team is just the first step, but then you need to activate this. You need to leverage this. And what's really hurt Pakistan is that because we couldn't really host any cricket in our country for over 10 years, a lot of organizations couldn't really take that partnership to the next level. And I think this is where I'm very optimistic personally, that Ramiz will allow organizations to make the most of these kind of partnerships, and that is why you're seeing multiple companies jumping in and trying to see where they can potentially contribute.
मुन्ना, मैं जिस खैरी भाई ने जो अभी पीसीबी की बात की ना, प्रोफेशनलिज्म को लेके, एंड टू अ सर्टेन एक्सटेंट ठीक है, यू अंडरस्टैंड ऑप्टिक्स आर इम्पोर्टेंट, राइट? मैं सिर्फ इस पे आई थिंक इट्स अ गुड डिस्कशन पॉइंट कि अगर हम प्रोफेशनलिज्म की बात करें, एंड आई एम ग्लैड ही ब्रॉट अप द लेट ग्रेट डीन जोन्स ने जो कहा था about the time that he applied, and I don't think I could have worded that any better. It is indeed a damning indictment of the level of professionalism the PCB operates with. लेकिन मैं इस पे सिर्फ ये बिकॉज अभी मैं रिसेंटली वर्नन फिलांडर का एक कमेंट पढ़ रहा था where he was like they reached out to him for the bowling coach का role for the national team, और उसने कहा कि मैंने उनसे एक फॉलो अप भेजा कि if you can give me a summary for the role and the requirements, as in what's expected of me in this role, what's the 3-year plan, what's the 5-year plan, even the 12-month plan to say. और उसने कहा कि they got back to me and they said कि okay, we'll let you know in the next coming days, और उसके बाद कोई response नहीं आया. And then he's like, I reached out to them myself कि if they can give me a follow up of what's expected of me in that role. They said okay, the role's already been filled, you don't need to worry about it. तो आप इससे उनके level of professionalism का I think it says a lot, right? मतलब not to be overly critical of it, but मैं इसलिए सिर्फ इस पे आना चाह रहा था because I think जो priorities है ना पाकिस्तान क्रिकेट की और PCB as an institution की, they don't get talked about enough. हमने discussion points तो होते रहते हैं, even spaces पे काफी हद तक discussions हुए हैं कि आप T20 क्रिकेट है या bilateral series है, आप बाज वक्त उनको preference दे देते हैं over the very pinnacle of the game, which is test cricket. और इस पे मुझे थोड़ा फील होता है कि चलो PSL to a certain extent ठीक है यार, आपका statement tournament है. We know how important the PSL is financially to the PCB itself, to the franchise owners, to the economy of the game within Pakistan. That's not up for discussion. कहने का मकसद सारा सिर्फ ये है कि अगर आप scheduling देखें, ठीक है, और आपकी PSL के खत्म होने के within 3 to 4 days इतनी बड़ी टेस्ट सीरीज शुरू हो रही है. तो is this not a lack of planning? Is this not a lack of professionalism for the PCB? And fair, I'll acknowledge कि ठीक है, कुछ ऐसी security logistics की constraints होती हैं, कुछ आपको request आती हैं from the other board that you're playing with, उनकी कुछ limitations होती हैं. But at what point do you expect कि the board will show the level of professionalism and put their foot down to say कि भाई ये टेस्ट क्रिकेट है, ये हमारी प्रायोरिटी है, राइट? दिस इज व्हाट वी आर स्ट्राइविंग टुवर्ड्स बिकमिंग, एंड बिकॉज ऑफ दैट रीजन हम जो बकिया सारी डिसीजंस लेंगे उसमें वी नीड टू शो दिस इज आवर अटमोस्ट प्रायोरिटी. क्या वो अभी हमें दिख रहा है? ये इस पे मैं चाह रहा था कि आप दोनों इस पे अगर थोड़ा सा चाइम इन करें.
So yeah, the first point that you mentioned about the Vernon Philander thing, again, that was really disappointing, and this is something which we've seen happen in the past as well. If you recall, during Mickey Arthur's tenure, the fielding coach left, and what was the reason that he gave? That he wasn't being paid his wages on time. Can you imagine that? I mean, how do you expect to be a top side if the board can't even pay its fielding coach on time? I mean, that was just ridiculous. Heads should have rolled, but as we all know, in Pakistan, nothing happened. But this is what the PCB needs to focus on. So for Vernon Philander to give, similar reasons where he's following up with the board and no one's getting back to him, that is inexcusable. And I'm not going to defend Ramiz on this. You would expect that Ramiz, who's worked with these players, in his during his commentary stints, he knows how to, engage with these guys. He understands how these people think, what their way of working is. You would expect him to bring about a positive change. But for this thing to happen again was really disappointing for me. So the PCB really needs to, get its house in order and sort out these issues, because these hurt the team big time. They really do. It's difficult to quantify the setback, but the fact of the matter is that these intangibles in the long run can really weigh the team down. Now, coming to the issue of priorities, I completely agree, and this is where I expected Ramesh to do better, because he's a purist of the game. Test cricket, as we all know, it has a dwindling audience. I mean, T20s has attracted a lot of new fans, but a lot of them are, they haven't. I mean, they've just recently started following the game, and they don't have the same kind of passion for Test cricket as those. For instance, fans like myself, who've been watching and who've been celebrating Pakistan cricket for almost 3 decades. I was 5 years old when I really got into Pakistani cricket, and ever since I've been hooked. So I've always felt that the test cricket as a format is where legends are made. And Ramiz, of all people, understands that sentiment as well. So that's why it was really surprising for me that they didn't give this series the weightage, or rather the importance that it deserved. And I think the results are there for everyone to see. I mean, we've been beaten by Australia rather comprehensively at the end. And, I mean, our captain at the end of the series was saying that Pakistan dominated for 2 tests, which I did not. I mean that was news to me, because I didn't see Pakistan dominate any test match. I mean, barring the first couple of days in the Pindi test, it was Australia all the way. So I mean, Pakistan has a long way to go in terms of prioritizing test cricket, because ultimately that is what sort of makes others, especially countries like England and Australia, truly respect you. So yeah, I mean, I hope in the future these mistakes aren't repeated, and Pakistan is able to get its test credentials, so to speak, back on track. I mean, one test series, I mean, losing a series to Australia at home, I mean, it happens. It's happened to other teams as well. But the fact is, this was a historic opportunity for us to demonstrate to Australia what this team is capable of. I mean, we have some fantastic talent. Shaheen Afridi, as we all know, is one of the top bowlers in the world today. Similarly, Naseem has so much to offer. So our bowling lineup isn't as hapless as it looked. If only they had slightly favorable pitches, and if only they had enough red ball practice, my feeling is that the results might have been different.
मैं कोचेस को यार थोड़ा सा डिफरेंटली देखता हूँ कि आपके नेशनल टीम के कोचेस के लिए एक तो जैसे आप लोगों ने भी बताया था कि वर्नन फिलेंडर ने जब अप्लाई किया था तो उसने उसने एक बड़ा स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड क्वेश्चन रखा था कि जो आप उसके पास एक शॉर्ट टर्म प्लान होना चाहिए, देन ही इज आस्किंग फॉर अ 3 ईयर प्लान एंड देन अ 5 ईयर प्लान. मतलब ये एक बहुत सी नॉर्मल प्रोसेस है जो आई थिंक किसी भी जॉब के लिए, ना सिर्फ कोचेस के लिए, किसी भी जॉब के लिए प्रोफेशनल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में एक टू एंड फ्रो एक कम्युनिकेशन होती है व्हाइल अप्लाइंग फॉर अ जॉब. लेकिन यहाँ ऐसा हमने कल्चर कभी देखा नहीं है. सेकेंडली, एक बहुत ज़्यादा ज़रूरी चीज़ ये है कि आपके जो ग्रासरूट लेवल है, ग्रास रूट लेवल के ऊपर आप किस तरह के कोचेस लेकर आ रहे हैं। यहाँ हम देख रहे हैं कि वही घिसे पिटे जो 5 साल 10 साल पहले जो कोचेस थे वही अभी तक जो चलते हुए आ रहे हैं। आपकी जूनियर टीम्स के ऊपर, आपकी डोमेस्टिक टीम्स के ऊपर, आपकी अंडर 19 टीम में वही कोच है जो भी आज से पता नहीं कितने साल पहले भी वही कोच था। हम वहाँ कोई प्रोग्रेस नहीं देख रहे। इसके ऊपर मैं आप लोगों के भी कमेंट्स जानना चाहूँगा कि ये जब तक हम वहाँ जो जो टेक्निकल फ्लॉज़ एक प्लेयर के फ़िल्टर आउट नहीं हो रहे, वो जब आते हैं अपनी नेशनल टीम की तरफ, हायर लेवल ऑफ क्रिकेट की तरफ जब बढ़कर आते हैं, तो वहाँ उन लोगों को इतनी ज़्यादा मुश्किल होती है। हमने अभी देखा जो हाल ही में जो टेस्ट सीरीज़ हुई थी, उसमें जब हम सीनियर प्लेयर्स की जो उनकी टेक्निक्स के ऊपर क्वेश्चंस उठ रहे थे कुछ, हम ये देख रहे थे कि कोई वो वहाँ भी अब एक एक प्लेयर है जो इतने सालों तक वो डोमेस्टिक क्रिकेट खेल रहा है, वहाँ कामयाबी उसने हासिल की है, वो फिर उसके बाद सीनियर टीम की तरफ आना शुरू होता है और वो वहाँ आके उस या वहाँ भी परफ़ॉर्म कर लेता है, 1 सीज़न, 2 सीज़न करता है, उसके बाद वो उसकी एक बुरी सीरीज़ आती है और उसके बाद उसके टेक्निकल फ्लॉज़ के बारे में हम डिस्कशन करना शुरू कर देते हैं। मेरे ख़्याल से एक इनको पीसीबी को क्या करना चाहिए कि जो आपका डोमेस्टिक जो स्ट्रक्चर है पूरा और आपका जो फिर नेशनल टीम का जो स्ट्रक्चर है, हम बहुत अक्सर औकात पे हम ये देखते हैं कि जब एक नेशनल लेवल पे प्लेयर, इंटरनेशनल लेवल पे प्लेयर जब आता है, तो उसकी कुछ खामियाँ जहाँ वो जब वहाँ आता है, तो वहाँ जाके एक्सप्लॉइट की जाती हैं। तो क्यों ना जो बीच में एक और इसके फ़िल्टर लगा दिया जाए, आपके डोमेस्टिक की और इंटरनेशनल लेवल के बीच में, आपके पास नेशनल हाई परफॉर्मेंस सेंटर्स हैं अब 3 शहरों में। आपने वहाँ भी बड़े टेक्निकल कोचेस रखे हैं। आपके पास मोहम्मद यूसुफ है, आपके पास अब शोएब महबूब हैं, जो कि हाइली क्वालिफाइड कोच हैं यूके से। उनके पास 20 साल का एक्सपीरियंस भी है कोचिंग का। उन्होंने यूके में भी कोचिंग की हुई है, आपके कतर में भी कोचिंग की हुई है उन्होंने। फिर आपके पास वसीम हैदर हैं, जो आपके डोमेस्टिक लेवल पे भी, जूनियर लेवल पे आपके बलोचिस्तान के मेरे ख्याल से थे और सेंट्रल पंजाब के सेकंड 11 के भी हेड कोच रहे हैं वो। तो ये आपके पास कोचेज़ हैं। आप अब तो यहाँ अगर प्लेयर कुछ टाइम स्पेंड कर ले बिफोर वी आस्क देम टू कम एंड प्ले एट द इंटरनेशनल लेवल, तो वहाँ अगर उनकी कोई ऐसे टेक्निकल फ्लॉज़ हैं या उनकी कोई शॉर्टकमिंग्स हैं या उनको अगर किसी चीज़ की ज़रूरी है, तो इन ऑर्डर टू प्रिपेयर देम बेटर फॉर द इंटरनेशनल लेवल बिफोर दे कम ओवर हियर, दे गो ऑन अ टूर। हमने देखा पिछले साल दानिश अज़ीज़, वो साउथ अफ्रीका जाता है और उससे शॉर्ट बॉल खेल ही नहीं जा रही। हम देखते हैं यहाँ साजिद खान की एक्यूरेसी के बारे में सवाल होते हैं। हम और भी जो प्लेयर्स के बारे में यहाँ देखते हैं कि इश्यूज़ खड़े किए जाते हैं। तो क्या आप लोगों को लगता है कि जो है एक एक और इनको यहाँ जूनियर लेवल पे या एक एक नेशनल हाई परफॉर्मेंस सेंटर्स के ऊपर ज़्यादा ज़्यादा वर्कआउट करने की ज़रूरत है इन प्लेयर्स के ऊपर?
चलिए ठीक है, पीएसएल जो है आपकी फॉर द शॉर्टर फॉर्मेट ऑफ द गेम या लेट्स से स्पेसिफिकली फॉर टी20 क्रिकेट, एक आपका ऐसा प्लेटफॉर्म है कि समबडी हु डजंट नेसेसरली हैव गुड परफॉर्मेंसेस फ्रॉम द डोमेस्टिक सेटअप, लेकिन ऑन पोटेंशियल भी अगर वो पीएसएल में आ जाता है, या किसी एक कोच ने वो कहीं उसको स्पॉट कर लेता है विद एन आई फॉर टैलेंट एंड सेज कि ये प्लेयर है, अगर इसको चांस दिया जाए तो मे बी ही कैन मेक एन इंप्रेशन। उसकी बेसिस पे अगर वो एक पीएसएल का अच्छा सीज़न खेल जाता है, ठीक है? या वो कोई 6-8 अच्छी परफॉर्मेंसेस दे देता है, तो अब ज़माना ऐसा है कि देयर इज़ इनफ प्रेशर दैट कैन बी क्रिएटेड थ्रू मेनस्ट्रीम मीडिया, थ्रू सोशल मीडिया टू मेक अ केस फॉर दैट स्पेसिफिक प्लेयर, और फिर वो आपकी व्हाइट बॉल टीम में भी आ जाता है, टी20 स्पेसिफिक टीम में आ जाता है, एंड देन वी हैव सीन न्यूमरस एग्जांपल्स ऑफ दिस विदिन द लास्ट 3 to 4 years. बट आई जस्ट कीप गोइंग बैक टू द पिनेकल ऑफ द गेम की जो हम बात कर रहे हैं ना, टेस्ट क्रिकेट के लिए स्पेसिफिकली या आपके लॉन्गर फॉर्मेट्स के लिए, आर वी डूइंग इनफ टू ग्रूम द प्लेयर्स? और अगर हम स्पेसिफिकली प्लेयर डेवलपमेंट की बात करें, तो अगर हम एक पाथवे की बात करें फ्रॉम डोमेस्टिक क्रिकेट या आपकी ग्रास रूट क्रिकेट से आप लेते हुए आए, ग्रेट क्रिकेट, अंडर अंडर 15, अंडर 17, अंडर 19, is there enough in your pathway to make successful players in the long run? ठीक है, इस तरह के न्यूमरस एग्जांपल्स हैं कि कुछ प्लेयर्स 3-4 फ्लैशी इनिंग्स खेलते हैं, दे लुक लाइक दे हैव ऑल द शॉट्स, और ऑब्वियसली द एस्थेटिकली बड़े प्लीजिंग होते हैं, तो एक वो क्राउड फैक्टर भी आ जाता है उसमें। फिर आप उनको चांस देते हैं, वो 3-4 अच्छी इंप्रेसिव इनिंग्स खेलते हैं, तो यू फील लाइक यू फाउंड अ वेरी लॉन्ग टर्म प्रोस्पेक्ट। फिर वही प्लेयर को 6-8 इनिंग्स में फेल हो जाता है, तो वो उसको आप डंप करना पड़ता है बिकॉज़ एक प्रेशर स्टार्ट हो जाता है, एंड देन द साइकिल सॉर्ट ऑफ रीस्टार्ट्स। तो मैं प्लेयर डेवलपमेंट को थोड़ा ब्रांच आउट करना चाह रहा था बिकॉज़ आई जस्ट थिंक इट्स अ वेरी जनरलाइज्ड और सॉर्ट ऑफ अ जेनेरिक टर्म। एंड स्पेसिफिक टू दिस मुझे नहीं फील होता कि हमारी जो पाथवे क्रिकेट है उस पर एक क्लैरिटी है. ठीक है, आपकी अंडर 19 के बैच में से हर साल या एवरी अदर ईयर कोई 3-4 ऐसे प्रॉमिसिंग लड़के होते हैं. इस बैच में भी हैं, जैसे कासिम अकरम हो गया, मोहम्मद शहजाद हो गया, अहमद खान हो गया, फॉर एग्जांपल, हु यू फील कि इफ यू पुट एन इन्वेस्टमेंट इन देम देयर इज अ फ्यूचर, राइट? दे आर able learners, they are willing to work on their game. पिछले बैच में I think Herrera is a very good example of this as well. लेकिन कहने का मकसद ये is the PCB as an institution, are they doing enough to groom those players and prepare them for what will come at that stage, to prepare them to absorb the level of pressure, जो competitiveness आप international circuit में expect करते हैं, क्या उसकी preparation हो रही है? जो media का जो pressure है, जो media training है, उसके लिए क्या उनको groom किया जाता है? Just general etiquette of being able to and again ये मैं कोई classist term नहीं use करना चाह रहा हूँ, बट एक बहुत से आपके प्लेयर्स ऐसे भी होते हैं, वी हैव टू कीप इन माइंड, जो बहुत से हम्बल बैकग्राउंड से आते हैं, एंड द वेरी फर्स्ट टाइम दैट दे आर ट्रैवलिंग अब्रॉड फॉर अ फॉरेन सीरीज, स्पेशली अगर वो किसी शाहीन या आपकी ए टीम टूर पे ना गए हो, will probably be when they're picked for the Pakistan team. So is the PCB doing enough to prepare them to for that stage so they know what to expect?
So you made a lot of a lot of points, right? So before I actually try and address them or share my thoughts on those, I think Munna had also raised a couple of really good points, and I'll first touch upon those very quickly. So, ek to usne baat ki on the coaches, right? In terms of the duration of the contracts, and he's absolutely spot on. That, for instance, I mean, if you apply it to yourself, if I had an option to work in an organization where I was only being offered a 6 months contract, and then on the flip side, there was another company allowing me to work with them as a long-term employee, I would obviously go towards the organization that's giving me the chance to showcase my credentials in the long run. So naturally, I think Philander and anyone else, they'd be, I mean, obviously they're well within their rights to ask for a slightly long-term tenure, because what else can they, I mean, can they demonstrate? I mean, it's naive to expect improvements over a period of just 3 to 4 months. You need to give someone time. And this again is going back to my point vis-a-vis Ramiz, where whoever is in a certain role, you need to give him enough adequate time to truly show and reveal what he has in terms of his capability. So I think that's a good point, Munna. And then secondly, I mean, I don't know whether you guys remember, but the GOAT Shane Warne, he had a lot of disagreements with John Buchanan, who was the then coach of the Australian team. And I remember he once said that the coach is only as good as driving the team to the stadium. And that's that's a rather extreme sentiment. But I think if you deconstruct his argument and you sort of peel away what Shane Warne was saying, basically what he was implying was that at the international level, those guys don't need coaching per se, right? They need someone who's a good man manager, someone who can help them better strategize. And that is why I feel, and I sort of adhere or sort of agree with what Warren was saying, because personally I feel that someone who has reached that international level, he's come through the ranks, right? I mean, he's played enough domestic cricket at different formats, and you don't need to tinker with their techniques too much, but it's more about giving them confidence, helping them plan out things, sort of supporting them when they're going through a rough patch. And that's what a great coach like Bob Woolmer was known for. I mean, if you listen to Yunus Khan's interviews and Shahid Afridi's interviews, who all performed exceptionally well during Bob Woolmer, during Bob Woolmer's tenure, all of them said that it's not that Bob Woolmer tried to change their techniques. He just gave them the confidence to go out there and express themselves. And I think that's really the ideal role of a coach. However, at the junior level, the under 15s, the under 17s, the under 19s, that is where I feel a coach should be hired and should be given a 2-year contract. And these coaches should be attached with all of our junior outfits. I know it's an expensive proposition getting on board international coaches, but that is something that you need to do. It's an investment that will pay off in the long run. So yeah, and that roadmap that Kenny you were talking about, that needs to be clear. Right now, it's a bit haphazard. I'm not personally, if you ask me, I'm not opposed to picking players from the PSL and playing them in the international T20 team. That's fine, because during the PSL they're getting exposed to playing with international players. They're sharing the same dressing room, and they're sort of picking up on those traits and those habits that make those guys world class players. And then transitioning into the international T20 stage, I don't think it's that too big of a leap. But the mistake that we typically make is that we pick someone from the PSL and then we sort of make him play the international ODIs, which I think is ridiculous. That is something that we need to avoid. So yeah, I mean that's where I stand on those issues. There are no ifs and buts about it. I mean, every player should know. For instance, just like you're working in an organization, if you're working as a brand manager, you know what you need to do to get to the position of a senior brand manager, right? Similarly, if you're working as an SPM, you know what you need to do to get to the position of, say, heading a division. Like, what are those skills that you need to acquire to be capable enough to assume those roles in the future? So the same applies to cricket. It's like any other profession, but if you don't give players that visibility in terms of how they need to improve, what they need to do to get to the next level, then naturally you will struggle. And right now, I feel it is so erratic. Selections are done on such an ad hoc basis that it doesn't really benefit anyone. And again, Pakistan cricket has been known to be blooding in youngsters and picking them up from relative obscurity and then sort of trying them out in the international arena. And more often than not, it's worked for us. But that's because people like Wasim Akram and all of these guys, these were prodigies, these were geniuses. They don't come around every other day, and that is why I said that Pakistan cricket has been thriving despite these structural failures. And this roadmap or this player development path that you were talking about, Canny, I think this is just one of those many issues that the PCB needs to sort out.
I think on this note, हम wrap up करते हैं आज की ये discussion, ये podcast. I think it has been a wonderful pleasure to have Heidi over here for our podcast, and also Kenny as my co-host. Always a pleasure to have him as well. जबरदस्त discussion रही guys. बहुत से जबरदस्त topics discuss हुए, और इस तरह की discussions I think होनी चाहिए fans के लिए. एक नया perspective मिलता है उन लोगों को game के बारे में. Let's hope we continue this discussion in future as well at some point. And I hope that Khari would be joining us for future podcasts as well. Thank you so much, Khari, for being a wonderful guest.
Inshallah, for sure. More than happy to support you guys. And as you rightly mentioned, yeah, it was a pleasure talking to you guys. That's always the case. And this was, no exception. So thank you for having me.
और हमारे listeners के लिए मैं request करता चलूँ कि please subscribe to our YouTube channel right away, and we hope that we will be bringing more interesting content in near future as well. We hope to come back with another podcast on another interesting topic with another exciting panel of guests. इंशाल्लाह लाज़िम अगर जिंदगी रही तो आपसे जल्द मुलाकात होगी, लेकिन जाने से पहले please visit www.cornertigers.net right away and become our member. As I have already requested you that please join us in our water well installation project charity drive, और हमें ट्विटर पे फॉलो करना भी ना भूलिएगा. बहुत सारी रिक्वेस्ट हो गई है, आपके ज़्यादा वक्त नहीं लूँगा, लेकिन ये इस वादे के साथ आपसे अलविदा ज़रूर करूँगा कि हम दोबारा आपसे जल्द मिलेंगे. प्लीज like our video and please support us in whatever way you can. I am again very thankful to all the support and love that we have been getting across different platforms. This is Munna, your host, signing off from CornerTigers.net podcast. See you soon. Allah Hafiz.